So, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Neurocalm Fatigue Summit. I'm really delighted today to have with me Heather McKean. And Heather has got quite an extraordinary story. She's a best-selling author, international speaker, creator of the Mind Change Method. She's a pioneer and leading expert in the neurobiology of trauma, chronic illness, and disease. And she had a near death in 2012 with multiple rare genetic diseases. And she realized she needed to deal with the real cause of all that chronic illness. And so she discovered some techniques that she used to heal herself, and she now helps other people. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. I'm so glad you're doing this. It's much needed, and I'm excited to not just be a part of it, but to watch it too.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff, and I'm sure yours will be right up there. Heather, do you want to tell the audience a bit about your extraordinary story?
I absolutely will. I sort of disclaimer it this way now. And I know for your audience, so many people are going to sit and listen to this going, there's just no way that that's true. But it's not as easy for me to talk about anymore. And it's not because it's triggering or, it's hard to talk about. It doesn't feel real anymore. It feels like I'm kind of telling a story about a client at this point, where I'm just not as associated to it anymore. So just my little disclaimer there. But I had back in 2012 is kind of where I start. And then I work backwards a little bit. But in 2012, I found myself, I was at home, sitting on my couch, hooked up to an IV drip that I was just sent home with because being in the hospital wasn't really serving me that much at that point. And I was in acute liver and kidney failure. And I had just come off of doing so many treatments and so many different things, and was kind of told that we might need to think about getting my affairs in order.
Wow.
And that was with a slew of fantastic, wonderful doctors who'd been supporting me excuse me, to my journey up to that point. And what had happened was that my body had just been systematically shutting down, and that didn't start within a small amount of time within that window. It really, as I look back now, I can see the lead up to how I ended up. And so some of the diagnoses that and I talk about this in my book, and I go a lot more in detail into the diagnosis in my book, but some of the big ones were chronic Lyme disease, and with multiple co-infections, and chronic fatigue was one of my early diagnoses, actually, and fibromyalgia, POTS, which is like dysautonomia, which really was a heart condition. And so I had rheumatoid arthritis. I was just doing this enormous amount of stuff, thyroid disease and all kinds of stuff. So now it's interesting how I ended up in liver and kidney failure, which looking back, I see now. I think when you're in this mode and you've got all this support with all these different doctors, and every time I went in, I seemed to gain a new issue, a new diagnosis. They were running blood on a weekly basis because of the majority of the medications that I was on had the side effect list that far worse, I think, than the original condition in the first place. But I really do believe all the doctors were doing the best they could at the time, really supporting me. And that's another aspect of it. Is I had a cardiologist that I was working with. I had a rheumatologist that I was working with, an infectious disease doctor, and a Lyme doctor, and an endocrinologist. All of these people were specialists that were focusing on one aspect of the diseases that I was doing, but weren't working necessarily all together. So the amount of medications and tinctures and drops and everything that I was on and injections was 180 a day. Wow. And I know I always get nurses that push back. That's not possible. I counted them up. That was the deal. And it wasn't like 180 different medications. But when I sat down to do, I took before breakfast, breakfast, after breakfast, before lunch, lunch, after lunch. It was like a full-time job just managing my medications. And when I counted them all up, it was 180. So the liver and kidney issue, I really believe, was actually secondary to everything else that was going on, and was really because of how many medications I was taking. Yeah. And so that was the moment. I have 2 little toddlers who are having to be so careful and gentle around my IV, around the stuff. And I remember just sitting there going, oh my gosh, this was my life. And I had a really profound aha, kick me in my butt moment at that point, which I'll kind of get into a little bit of my history and what I really believe now was contributing to all of that stuff. But my relationship with my family, I had what could be traditionally called a traumatic past, a traumatic history. My mother was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and also a tremendously abused woman herself. And one of the things that I had kind of stuck with me over the years was that I didn't have this mother-daughter relationship. My mom was wrapped up in a lot of other stuff, really just trying to survive, but you don't know that as a child. It doesn't feel like that as a child. As a child, I felt like she was choosing these things over me. So you can guess what that did with our attachment. But I had a lot of abandonment, I think, issues, which I didn't have the language for many, many, many years, but I know that now. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to do the same exact thing to my children. Now it looks different. I'm not on, different medication or drugs. I'm not on street drugs or even over abusing, drugs that you get from the doctor. But I'm going to die. I'm going to abandon my children. And really, it's from drugs. And it's from all of these different things. And I would have liked to have tried to make that jump. Yeah, but I couldn't help it. Yeah, but this is happening to me. But nothing I could have said to my kids, had that been my trajectory and had I ended it in that story, would have helped them feel any more or any less abandoned. Right.
So what turned you around there? Was that the insight? And then, like, what did you jump to when you realized that? What happened next?
Yeah, so that was a big, guilty, because you swear, I will never let my children go through what I went through, right? That's kind of that thing that drives you. I will be different. I will not recreate this thing from my childhood. And then I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, I'm going to actually recreate this. And almost maybe I upped the ante a little bit. I was going to be gone, right? Mm-hmm. So that was big, but I didn't have the emotional maturity at the time to do anything but guilt and shame around that. So I felt a tremendous amount of guilt and shame, which had been previously in my life big motivators for me. And so I kind of I made that decision, like, I don't want to go anywhere. I can't die. Not for me, not because I was like, I can't leave my kids like that. Mm. So it happened to be that within a couple of days, a doctor came to my house, and he was one of the doctors that was on my support team, right? Making house calls to me, actually, because of the condition that I was in. And he had watched my journey, and he knew how desperate I was to get well and how I had tried everything. I was one of those, I had tried everything. And I was really committed to anything that I did. I mean, I was on 180 meds. I was committed to doing whatever they told me to do. And he said, have you ever heard of tapping? He's like working on my body and doing this stuff. And he's like, have you ever heard of tapping? And I was like, nope, haven't heard of tapping. He's like, I really don't know much about it. Maybe you should just check it out. I've just heard some stuff about it. So maybe you should check it out. Just desperate for anything, right? So here he is recommending to me something that he didn't really even know much about, was like, maybe. So of course I just went ahead and looked that right up and found the tapping solution, which is with the Ortners, which is EFT, really, emotional freedom technique, which I knew nothing about at the time. So I heard them say basically that maybe what was going on in all these physical ailments and illnesses was trapped energy in my body because of trauma. And I was like, well, definitely there's been trauma. So what if, like at that point, you're just so open, right? I'm like, okay, maybe that's really the case. Now, I didn't feel at the time, which I now know, I was just so dissociated, so incredibly dissociated, had lived most of my life that way. I just didn't really inhabit my body very often. And so I was like, well, there's trauma, but I don't really feel anything about it. Like, look at what I've done. I've made my way out of it. That doesn't really bother me anymore. But I kept listening, I kept watching, and they're like, okay, so what you need to do for every traumatic event is like this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, whatever it is. And then you just do that for every trauma. And I was like, I'm gonna die sick. Like, I'm not, if I have to do that for every trauma, I'm in big trouble. But I will say what that did was opened my mind for the first time to this mind-body connection.
Right.
And that was everything. The fact that maybe it wasn't just a virus or my genetics, or, maybe it does have something to do with my past. That just cracked the door open just enough for me to step into. And I went right into that. Really, I went ahead and just dove in studying, EFT, which was great. And I have to say, it helped me. The concepts that I learned, I was like, oh my goodness. And what I describe as one of my first mind change moments was when it was suggested that I might be doing this to myself.
Right. How did that land though, Heather? I mean,
No, I know.
that's a really hard thing, right? And you can hear people going, no, I haven't, this is outrageous, So how did that land with you?
Okay, I wasn't ready for it before. I will tell you that. I had a doctor in my Lyme journey. He was kind of an old, I think, old school guy. And he came in and he's like, you don't have Lyme disease. This is they're just making this stuff up, and, and it's bigger than it should be, and da, 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 da. And I was like, but I'm pretty sure I have this. So I want you to test me. And he's like, well, I'll bleed you if you want me to bleed you, but it's all in your head. I walked out of that doctor's office so mad, so like, how can I get this guy? Like, this isn't cool. This isn't okay. This is, victim shaming and all this different stuff. And now I don't think he was operating from the place that I heard it happen again, when I heard that idea happen again. But when I heard that idea happen again, it landed so differently with me.
Why?
And here's the piece. I thought, okay, let's just for a second consider what if that's true? What if I do have something to do with this? And without fault, blame, or shame, those are the things that really muddy these waters. What if it's just information that I have something to do with this? And that little thing in my brain went, if I am so powerful to create this myriad of different diseases, some of which I had never even heard of, and do them so well. I was getting like those accolades. My Lyme doctor was like, I've never seen so many co-infections in one person. You have more strains of Babesia than I've ever seen. I'm like, those are not the kind of accolades you want. But I was doing them so well. That little piece in my brain went, well, if I can create all of this, what if I create something different? What if I'm so powerful that I can create something completely different? What if I can create the life of my dreams instead? And that's a component which I think I can't leave out anymore of the mind-body piece. I think we're mind-body spirit, mind-body energy. There's something else. There's a third component. And I think that's what was speaking, some really, really, really deep wisdom that I had just not listened to for so long, that just tried to speak up one last time and say, yeah, but what if, Heather? Like, what if actually you're amazing? I was like, oh, that just shifted everything. And I know it's going to sound hokey, but I really believe that's where I healed. That moment healed me. Now, I had a lot of work to do to catch up. I had a lot of work to do to catch up, but I really believe it was that belief, that knowledge, that wisdom that clicked in, that I thought, oh, I can do this. I just need to be focusing on completely different things.
Okay, so that relates, doesn't it, to the idea of the power of the mind in placebo, for example. Like, I mean, I believe there's research that shows that sometimes the outcomes from placebo, because we believe at whatever conscious or unconscious level, can be more impressive than the results of the actual drugs they're testing. And that confirmation bias in the human is so strong that it's a massive problem for medical science. They spend so much time trying to eradicate our beliefs in order to test things. So it sounds like what you're saying also goes to that. And also, it sounds as if the insight as well shifted you into a different mode of relating to the world, because I guess, given your attachment history, right down in your pre-verbal layers, everything would have felt dangerous and threatening and everything else. And at that moment, I'm guessing that some part of you connected to the world in a different way that opened up a kind of trust that maybe hadn't been there before.
So true. Absolutely. In my book, I talk about this. Now, and maybe a lot of your listeners will know, and a lot of the contributors will know how much goes into what you just said, how that our nervous system, how our memories, how we're wired that way. There's many different ways that we can view that, from a polyvagal lens, from a therapy lens, from, a memory lens. But in the book, I take it really basic to make it accessible for everybody. And I call it victim victor.
Yep.
And the victim mindset for me was such a way that I operated. And it makes sense. And as a child, I truly was a victim. I had no say in what happened to me, and no other way really for my brain to, like, you don't have all of your prefrontal, cortical abilities at that point. And so you can't think outside of yourself. You can't think, yeah, but my mom is doing the best she can. It's really just about me. And okay, well, if she's doing these things, there must be something wrong with me.
Mm.
There must be a reason. I'm a burden. I'm not doing good enough. I need to help more. I need to be more. And then I'll make it easier for her to love me. And then it'll be okay. Right. And it just shifts and it wires you and everything like that. And that's that victim mentality where everything outside of you is really dictating everything that happens inside of you. But we mature and we grow and we do, hopefully move into a state where we do have agency, we do have sovereignty, where we are no longer a victim to those things, but oftentimes we stay in alignment with it. So we end up in relationships, we end up in jobs, we end up in situations where it keeps those cycles going, where we stay victimized. And I think that was the thing for me, where that moment where maybe I have something to do with this was like, okay, that put power back inside of me. And I didn't know, I didn't have the language for this back then. And so all of this is retroactively, talked about and thought through, but it put power back inside of me, power that I hadn't remembered consciously. I hadn't even really experienced subconsciously, where I think that's that other part of me, that deep internal wisdom that was like, yeah, but you are powerful. And really none of this is your fault, but it is now your responsibility. And I was like, whoa, this is big. So it definitely, it changed everything for me.
So
I know that some people aren't ready.
What did you do after that practically, Heather? Because you said you had this shift, right? So you've got this, inner child, very early pre-verbal material that had never had attachment, was feeling very unsafe. And, as you say, for the first 3 years of our lives or so, we literally cannot do anything other than receive what comes in. And even if you'd understood as a child, oh, my mum's struggling, that wouldn't have dealt with the embodied dynamic. You might have had some understanding, but you need that right brain to right brain and body to body safety, which you didn't have. And then I guess growing up unconsciously replicated a lot of those patterns, as we do. We unconsciously replicate our patterns, which you've just implied about, with our jobs, our relationships. We tend unconsciously to be seeking healing. And one way we do it, it seems, is seeking out similar situations in which we're replaying constantly the pattern that we need to, deal with. And so you said that you had this massive moment of insight that like really shifted your sense of who you are in the world and your sense of your agency in relation to your life. But you also said you had to do a lot of work after that. So where did you go? What were the layers of that?
So I did first use EFT, and I saw a lot of great shifts with EFT. And I got really into that and got, trained and certified and everything. And then I'm not going to say it stopped working, because I don't think it stops working. I think there's something really great about that modality, but there was something more. And I started working with clients and everything, and I stepped back and I'm like, why is this working for some things and not other things? And why did I feel, it was just this, and it awoke this sort of research type of mentality in me, where I was like, I know there's something in our brain. I had just heard enough about neurobiology, actually worked with someone who was one of the pioneers in epigenetics, and had some great conversations with him. And I started to just get curious about what is happening in our brain. So I really pulled back from EFT, and I was like, okay, I need to know. So I started studying neurobiology. Armchair expert here, like complete armchair expert. But I just dove in. I consumed as much information as I could. And at this point, I was on disability. I still had the ability to do this, even though so much had changed. I really felt well. Had you asked, I'm well. I'm just waiting for my body to catch up. That was my mantra. I'm well. I'm waiting for my body to catch up. And it did happen really fast, I will say. Within 3 months, I was off all medications. And of course, I titrated. I worked with the doctors. That is a brilliant story that I could probably tell another time. How my doctors responded to me being like, oh, by the way, I'm well. I just want you to support me now in my wellness. And I really feel like what had shifted in me shifted something in them. I was able to see in them something different, this like desire to heal, this desire to help people. And they helped me get off all these meds and everything. And eventually the Lyme doctors even started sending me clients, which is like crazy. Anyway, so going back, I started studying neurobiology, and then I was like, okay, wait a minute. There's all these great modalities. So I studied NLP, and then I studied EMDR, and then DNRS. And I started to realize, wait, there's a piece. There's this really important piece that I feel like everyone's touching on and yet not fully getting. And that's where I feel like pulling from everyone else's wisdom. I'm not saying I just developed all of this stuff out of my own brain. No, I had the ability to step back and pull all of this wonderful information. And with I wasn't married to any modality. I wasn't married to any line of academia. I was just able to take in whatever. And I feel like all the pieces lined up. And I was like, oh my gosh, I get it. I get why I feel like I know how to change everything that happens, no matter how someone's representing it.
So what's the piece?
And the piece is how we store information.
Okay.
Now we can get super technical about this, right? We can get into the, implicit, explicit memory. We can get into the somatics of it. We can get into all of that stuff. And it's great. And there's so much great information out there. And if you've got the time, but there are just people who are sick and they want to feel better. And so I try to make it as user-friendly for people who don't have the kind of time that I did, to look at all these different things. So we store memory basically, and this is from NLP, they call it the representational systems. So basically when anything happens to us, we're storing it through either visual, kinesthetic, audio digital, which is the mantras and the beliefs that we make up about things. There's some way that we're doing all of it. All of our senses are happening, especially when it's a traumatic memory, right? But we primarily put it in one way. And that one way it depends on where it gets stored in the brain. It depends on what then triggers us, right? Because certain things you can see things happen over and over again, and people are like, meh, but you hear it and poof, you're right back in a flashback. where different, you smell something and it's different for people, right? Trauma comes out different. And I'll call that trauma, again, using, I think it's Gabor Mate, anything that overwhelms the body's ability to cope is trauma. So how that then represents has so much information on how it was stored. So if we can figure out how it was stored, primarily, it's almost like direct access into getting into that neural pathway, wherever it is in the brain, whatever memory way it was stored, we kind of cut through all that and go, okay, well, that's clearly the way you're doing it. And then if we can represent it and then interrupt it, because everything's a cyclical, like a circular cycle in our body, right? Something triggers us in our brain and the body responds, or if there's a response in the body, right? Because we've done it so many times, so it's somatically stored, but then it still has to send information up to the brain to go to sort through, make meaning of it, right? So we keep having this cyclical cycle. And from hypnosis, I learned this pattern interrupt thing. It's, if you've ever seen performance hypnosis where they do the induction, the handshake induction. So, and that's how they get people into this hypnotic state, right? There's no real magic about that other than you're introducing something that's a normal, everyone knows when you reach your hand out to shake, pretty much worldwide, someone's going to reach out and shake your hand. When you introduce a foreign stimulus to that, something completely unexpected, our brains have this little, I call glitch moment.
PGO spike, right?
Yes. So that's, and we are really programmable in that moment.
Yeah.
If we can get into that moment, I feel like it just zooms right into that neural pathway we were about to fire, or we were firing, and now we've got this little rewritable moment. And so depending on how it was stored, so we can use EMDR if it was stored visually. We can use EFT if it was stored kinesthetically. We can use, I don't really use DNRS in that way, but we can use concepts around DNRS if it was stored audio digitally, right? It's like we've got all these wonderful tools, but you have to know which. Is it a screwdriver? Is it a wrench? What do you need? And when you've got that figured out, we have access.
That's fantastic. So it's memory reconsolidation work, isn't it? But tailored through the dominant sense of the storage. And you're firing the neural pathways, you're scrambling them, and then you're introducing new structures that the brain then consolidates to produce different experience, which lands in the whole lived experience of that person's life from that point, right? Yes. And that's the beauty of it, is that neural pathway that had stored, and we can talk about all the ways it was stored, whether it's explicit or implicit, or, was it procedural, all those things, right? We can get into all the details of it. But again, what matters is I want to feel better. I don't want to do this anymore. Sure. So we can degrade that neural pathway, and we can interrupt it, and introduce a more congruent storyline. We can give context, right? So even with my attachment issues, like with my mom back in the day, I was able to step back and give so much context to the situation where, honestly, Anna, I couldn't feel bad anymore. I couldn't blame anymore. I couldn't feel like it was my fault anymore, or hers for that matter. Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? And you're also bringing prefrontal capacities there as well into play for the context. But what amazes me with these techniques is how instant they can be. Like you can literally see someone carrying traumatic energy, feeling the state that they felt when the trauma occurred. You can go in and use one of these techniques, and then you ask them, can you find the feeling? And they literally cannot find it in that moment. They can't find it anymore. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. So incredible. Right? It's so, and people have it, unless you've done it, it's hard to believe that it can happen. It's even I see that with clients all the time. Doing it though, isn't it? It's even hard sometimes when you see it happening in front of you. There's a part of you that goes, really?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I was actually speaking with some of my practitioners in a group. We've trained some people in the modality, and we were talking in a practitioner group and getting into some of the aspects of some client work. And I said, you know what? I think we all just need to step back for a second and realize how commonplace miracles are for us. Like how commonplace it is for us to see people be set free from something that they either were told was going to be permanent for the rest of their lives, that they were going to have to medicate for or mitigate, or something they've been in therapy for years and still just couldn't fully be released from it. And within minutes sometimes, we see they're like, I cannot do this and I can't make this bother me. And we see it and we're like, how is this people released from disease and everything? And I wanted us to just remember, we see stuff that is just not commonplace out there.
Well, the thing that strikes me about it is the miracle is human adaptability, is the human system, and the brain-body connection, and the fact that the body itself stores all this information. It's all highly intelligent. And now with neuroscience, we are getting increasing access to understanding just how extraordinary the most complex known object in the universe, the human brain, really is. And that's the thing that really blows me away about this, is what it says about us as human beings, our capacity for transformation.
And then if you even just step into the, quantum mechanics fields, where we're like, oh, and we're all connected.
Yeah.
And this is a shared experience. And this dis-ease and this stuff is collective as well. And I know that you had mentioned fatigue earlier, and that fatigue is so common now that we even have, it's chronic. It's chronic across the world, this fatigue.
Yeah.
But we're tired of something different than we think we're tired of. I really believe we're tired of this disconnection, this disempowerment, this dissociation. I feel like we've been increasingly dissociating for so many generations that it is just coming now. And what we're carrying, what's fatiguing us, is carrying generations of unresolved trauma, of unresolved stuff, of this disempowerment, this dissociation. And it is weighing on our bodies. And it's not necessarily a bad message.
No, absolutely. And also the dissociation goes even to the relationship of the body to the world and to the environment, toxins. I mean, the fact that your doctors titrated you off and you felt so much better, in part would have been getting those drug effects out of your system. And we're also porous and networked to the worlds in which we live. The things we consume, the things we pass out of our bodies, we're also intimately networked that way, let alone at the level of the epigenetic and the consciousness and all the rest of it. So I think you're right. I think dissociation, separation, and thinking about collective community, connectedness, fatigue seems to be an incredible warning and incredible wisdom and an incredible opportunity all at once, to my mind. We're running a bit short of time now, Heather, because I think we've got well carried away there. I know that you've got a gift for the audience. Do you want to tell them what it is?
Yes. So one of the things I remember in learning about all these things was like, this is great information. What do I do? Like, I need some victories now. I just wanted practical information. So we created a course, and it's a 14-day jumpstart course. It gets into practicals. You want some immediate changes. So it really dives into, we give really lovely bite-sized information. And we're always trying to pull all of these beautiful intellectual, scientific and researched things into the normal person's realm, right? Like, okay, what do I do? I'm sitting home sick. I want to know what to do here. So we've got these bite-sized bits of information, really great information, but then what to do about it. And so it's a video course, an online course, and it really helps people go through lots of tools, lots of stuff to get into. We want people to have access to this information. So that's what it is. It's a free course that people can jump into.
That is absolutely amazing, Heather. And I want to thank you for a very stimulating conversation. It's been absolutely lovely to spend time with you. And I want to say goodbye to everyone, to remind you that the gift will be available below the video for the next 48 hours. Grab it while you can. And thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.